My name is Rebecca, but people call me Becca, and I'm 61. At my daughter's baby shower, I sat quietly in the circle of guests, smiling through the chatter and the rustle of pastel-colored wrapping paper. When it was my turn, I passed her a small silver-wrapped box, tied with a white ribbon I'd kept for my own wedding. My heart beat fast, not because it was expensive, but because it carried meaning. Inside was a sterling rattle, polished until it gleamed, passed down through 3 generations of women in our family. Claire tore the paper, lifted the lid, and pulled it out. She held it up between 2 fingers like it was a strange trinket. Then she laughed. "A rattle? Seriously, Mom? Everyone else brought car seats and strollers, and you bring this?" The room went silent, then a few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. My stomach twisted as if someone had yanked the floor from under me. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my lips tightening into a smile I didn't feel. I'd been proud of that gift, sure it wasn't shiny or new, but it was love, history, and blessing all in one. And in that moment, as my daughter's words echoed, I felt something inside me snap. What no one in that room knew, not Claire, not her fiancé, not a single guest, was that I had come prepared to give her something far greater than any stroller or car seat. Something that could change her future entirely. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this one resonate with you, hit subscribe. I never imagined I would be raising a child alone. My husband David passed away when Claire was only 4. One moment he was with us, planning a backyard garden, and the next, a heart attack stole him away. At 30, I found myself both mother and father, standing in a kitchen that felt suddenly too big, staring at bills that seemed to multiply overnight. I worked as a public school English teacher, and the salary was never much. Still, I held on tightly to the idea that if I sacrificed enough, if I managed every penny, my daughter could have the kind of future I never did. I didn't want her life limited by circumstances the way mine had been, so I started a notebook. An old leather-bound one that had belonged to my mother. On its first page, in neat handwriting, I wrote, "Claire's Future Fund." Every month after the bills were paid, I recorded what little I could set aside. Sometimes it was $20, sometimes only $5. But as the years went by, the notebook grew heavier with ink and hope. I can still remember nights when I'd sit at the kitchen table, after grading stacks of essays, with that notebook open in front of me. The lamplight was dim, my eyes tired, but I'd smile as I wrote another entry. I wasn't just saving money. I was writing love into those pages, believing that someday Claire would see the story behind every number. Claire was my joy. She had her father's green eyes and a laugh that carried through the house like music. When she was little, I'd read to her every night. She always wanted Charlotte's Web or Anne of Green Gables, and she begged me to do the voices. Sometimes, after a long day, I'd think I didn't have the energy, but then she'd climb into my lap, and I'd remember that nothing mattered more than giving her those moments. I skipped vacations. I drove the same car until it rattled like an old tin can. When Claire needed new shoes, I patched mine. I clipped coupons religiously, tucked away my teacher bonuses, and even picked up tutoring during summers. I told myself every sacrifice would be worth it when I saw her succeed. We were close, at least for a time. She'd run home from school with stories, waving crayon drawings in my face, and we'd tape them on the fridge. I still have one, a crooked house with 2 stick figures holding hands. She labeled them, "Me Please Mom." That paper has yellowed with age, but I've never had the heart to take it down. When Claire entered high school, the gaps between us started to widen. I told myself it was normal, teenagers pull away, but I also began to notice a change. She wanted the newest clothes, the expensive phone. I couldn't keep up with her friends' parents, who seemed to have endless money for trends. She'd sigh when I suggested budget-friendly alternatives. By college, the entitlement was harder to ignore. I remember visiting her dorm freshman year. I brought homemade cookies and a care package filled with essentials, shampoo, notebooks, a cozy blanket. She smiled politely but set them aside like they were things she didn't really need. What she wanted was money. "Everyone else's parents are paying for their spring break trips," she told me once. "Why can't you loosen up a little?" I bit my tongue, reminding myself she didn't see the ledger I carried in my notebook. She didn't know that every choice I made had been for her. To her, I was just the mother who said no too often. Through it all, I leaned on my sister Diane. She never married, never had children, but she was my rock. She adored Claire and often reminded me I was doing the best I could. "Someday she'll understand," Diane would say. "Kids can't always see the sacrifices until they're older." I wanted to believe that. Claire's fiancé, on the other hand, was another matter. From the start, he struck me as distant, almost dismissive. Michael was polite enough, but I sensed he viewed me as an obstacle rather than family. At dinners, he'd nod absently when I spoke, his eyes drifting back to his phone. Once, I overheard him telling Claire, "Your mom worries too much about money. We'll be fine without her penny-pinching advice." That stung. He didn't know about the notebook, about the years of careful planning. I stayed quiet, storing the words away like stones in my pocket, weighing me down. And yet, despite these moments, I clung to hope. I believed that when the time came, when Claire held her first child in her arms, she would finally see what motherhood meant. I thought she would look at me with new eyes and realize why I'd done it all, why I had put her needs above my own for decades. That dream carried me through the years. The dream of being appreciated not with grand gestures, but with a simple thank you, a moment of recognition that all my sacrifices mattered. The notebook never left my side. Even when the pages grew wrinkled and the leather cracked, I kept writing. Each deposit, no matter how small, felt like proof that I was building something lasting for her. I imagined the day I would hand it over, the day she would see not just the money, but the story of her life written in those careful lines. But life rarely follows the script we write for it. Claire grew into a woman with sharp edges, a quick wit, and an appetite for more than I could give. And though I kept trying, I felt her gratitude slipping further from my reach. Looking back now, I can see the signs were always there. The rolled eyes when I gave her practical gifts, the jokes about my teacher's salary, the subtle ways she measured love in dollars rather than deeds. Still, I never let myself believe she would mock me openly, not in front of others. Not on a day meant to celebrate new life and family, but the baby shower proved otherwise. And in that moment, the old leather notebook in my drawer pages filled with hope and sacrifice took on a new meaning. Because sometimes love isn't enough to protect you from betrayal. The house was dressed in pink and gold that afternoon. Streamers hung from the ceiling, balloons bobbed against the walls, tables were piled high with finger foods and pastel cupcakes. Laughter carried through the rooms, and for a while I let myself soak it in. My daughter's baby shower. A day I'd been waiting for. I had prepared my gift carefully, wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with a ribbon I'd saved for years. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was ours, a family treasure. A piece of history that mattered more than anything bought from a store. When it was my turn, I passed the box to Claire. My hands shook a little, but my heart was steady. I pictured her face softening, maybe even tearing up when she realized what I'd given her. She tore into the paper, pulled back the lid, and held it up. The silver rattle glinted under the light. She tilted her head, eyebrows raised, lips curling. "Really, Mom? A rattle? Everyone else brings car seats, strollers, gift cards, and you bring this?" The room froze. Then a ripple of awkward laughter spread, people shifting in their seats. My heart slammed against my ribs. I tried to smile, to swallow the heat rushing to my face, but her words cut deep. I gripped the edge of my chair, nails pressing into the wood. Did she know what that rattle meant? Did she care? My stomach twisted as I glanced around. Some guests avoided my eyes. Others gave me pitying looks, the kind that sting worse than laughter. Inside, my voice whispered, "She doesn't understand. She doesn't know the truth. She doesn't know the gift I was ready to give." I had spent decades building it, every sacrifice written in that leather notebook, every hour of work, every dollar saved. It was supposed to be hers, the college fund I had guarded, not just money, but a symbol of everything I had ever done for her. And in that moment, sitting there, as she mocked me in front of family and friends, something broke. My love didn't vanish, But the blind devotion, the belief that she would one day see me clearly, it slipped away like sand between my fingers. She laughed again, tossing the rattle back into the box as if it were nothing more than junk. People turned to see my reaction. I held my chin high, lips curved in a faint smile, but inside, my chest ached as though someone had punched straight through my ribs. My thoughts raced. She doesn't deserve it. Not now. Not like this. I felt my hand brush against my purse where I had tucked away the envelope, an envelope she didn't even know existed. Inside, it was the first step to unlocking everything I had saved, the key to the life I thought I'd be giving her. No one else knew. Not a soul. And as Claire basked in the laughter, waving off my gift as though it were nothing, I made a decision I never thought I would. She would not get the fund. Not now. Not after this. I smiled at her, a polite, fragile curve of lips, while inside my heart hardened with resolve. The baby shower went on, games, cake, gifts piled high, but for me, the celebration had ended the moment she mocked that rattle. The silver heirloom sat abandoned on the gift table, its shine catching the light, ignored. I stared at it, jaw tight, pulse heavy in my ears. That rattle had been meant as a prelude, a bridge to the larger gift I had planned. Now, it stood as a symbol of something else entirely. Love, disrespected. Sacrifice, dismissed. I sat quietly, nodding when people spoke, but inside I had already begun rewriting the future. She thought she knew me. She thought I was predictable, the mother who would always give no matter how she treated me. But she was wrong. That day, in a room full of laughter and balloons, I decided to take everything back. After the baby shower, I went home and sat in the quiet. The laughter from earlier still rang in my ears, but twisted now, sharp as broken glass. I set my purse on the table, pulled out the envelope, and stared at it for a long time. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the storm inside me. That envelope was meant to be a gift, the doorway to a future I had worked decades to build. The beginning of Claire's inheritance. But after what she did, after the way she mocked me, all I could see when I looked at it was betrayal. I thought back to the years when every dollar mattered. Nights when I'd come home from school with stacks of papers to grade, eyes burning from exhaustion, and still I'd say yes to tutoring sessions. Saturday mornings spent in crowded libraries, helping other children while Claire slept in. My paychecks weren't large, but I learned to stretch them like elastic. I clipped coupons until the edges of my scissors dulled. I mended my own shoes with glue. Vacations? A fantasy. Even when Diane begged me to take a week off, I shook my head. I couldn't afford luxuries. It wasn't just money I was saving. It was pieces of myself, every skipped dinner, every late night, every dollar written into that leather notebook. And all for her. The notebook still sits in my desk drawer, its spine worn, the ink fading on early pages. On the last page I wrote, in neat lines, the final total, $180,462, every cent traced back to sacrifice. I thought she would understand someday. I thought when I told her, her face would soften, her eyes would widen, and she would finally see me. Finally thank me. But now, the day after the shower, I walked past Claire's house. She and a group of friends were on the porch, glasses of wine in their hands, laughter spilling into the street. I slowed when I heard my name. She means well, Claire said, her tone light, mocking, but she's so old-fashioned. I swear my mom doesn't get it. She still thinks gifts like trinkets matter. Michael and I? We're focused on real things, money. Investments, not sentimental stuff. Her friends laughed. My stomach dropped. I felt my throat tighten, my legs rooted to the sidewalk. I turned quickly before anyone saw me, my chest heavy with shame and anger. Old-fashioned. That's what she called me. Later that week, I overheard Michael talking when I came by with a casserole. He didn't see me in the hallway. Your mom, he muttered to Claire, she's stuck in another era. She acts like scraping pennies together makes her some kind of hero. Honestly, she should keep her advice to herself. We'll manage our lives without her constant worrying. I froze. I held that casserole like a shield, my hands aching from the weight of it. Their voices felt like knives, sharp, careless. When I finally walked inside, Claire smiled faintly, as though nothing had been said, and Michael barely looked up from his phone. That night, I unlocked the desk drawer in my bedroom. Beneath the notebooks, the clipped receipts, lay a folder. Inside, the account details, the papers that proved every deposit, every dollar saved. I slid my fingers along the crisp edges. It was real, tangible. A lifetime's worth of sacrifice bound in those papers. I laid them out across the desk, staring at the numbers. I whispered to myself, she doesn't deserve this, not now. But then doubt crept in. This was my daughter, my only child. Would taking it away punish her, or punish the grandchild I hadn't even met yet? My hand shook as I gathered the papers back into the folder, shoving them deep into the drawer, locking it tight. Days passed, but the tension didn't ease. Every time I looked at Claire, I saw her smirk, heard her laugh, replayed the way she dismissed my gift. Every time I heard Michael's voice, I heard contempt. At night, I'd wake in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the house, my heart pounding. I'd think of all the meals I had skipped, all the birthdays I had gone without buying myself anything, all the nights I had cried silently at the kitchen table, clutching that notebook. And for what? To be laughed at? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The fund wasn't a gift anymore, it was power. And power, in the wrong hands, destroys. I started to imagine different futures. What if I redirected it? What if instead of placing it into Claire's hands, I saved it for the baby? The thought crept in slowly, then grew louder, steadier, until it felt like the only way forward. Still, part of me hesitated. Claire was my daughter. The bond between mother and child doesn't just vanish. I told myself she could change. Maybe once the baby was born, she would soften. Maybe motherhood would open her eyes, but deep down, I wasn't sure. Every glance, every word she spoke about money and status, every time she rolled her eyes at me, it all told a different story. I returned to the desk night after night, unlocking the drawer, staring at those deed papers, running my fingers along their edges. They seemed to whisper back at me, reminding me of every choice I had made, every piece of myself I had given up. I whispered into the empty room, "What do I do?" "What do I do?" the silence answered. And in that silence I knew, whatever decision I made, it would change everything. For years, I kept the truth hidden in that old leather notebook, in the locked drawer, in the envelope I carried that day at the shower. People think teachers don't earn much. They're right. But what they don't know is what happens when someone like me saves and saves and saves for nearly 3 decades. It wasn't a small fund, not a few thousand tucked away for emergencies. No, when I added it all together, accounts, interest, bonds, the total was nearly $180,000. My entire life's work, every extra shift, every coupon clipped, every birthday I went without a gift for myself. That money was meant for Claire. That was the plan from the beginning. The baby shower wasn't supposed to end with humiliation. It was supposed to end with me handing her an envelope. A check that would secure her family's future. My secret gift. The moment I believed would finally show her how much I loved her. And the truth? Even after she mocked me, even after the laughter, I still considered giving it to her. I sat there, cheeks burning, heart aching, and thought, maybe she's nervous, maybe she doesn't mean it, maybe this is just a mistake. I wanted so badly to believe it wasn't who she truly was. But then I heard her again. It was later that evening, when most of the guests had gone. I stepped into the hallway to grab my coat. That's when her voice carried from the kitchen. She was talking with 2 of her friends, giggling over glasses of wine. Can you believe that gift? My mom is hopeless. Always clinging to old junk like it's valuable. Honestly, sometimes I think she just likes playing poor so people will pity her. Thank God Michael and I don't need her money. They laughed, loud, sharp, cruel. I froze. The words sliced through me, each one colder than the last. Hopeless. Playing poor. Thank God we don't need her money. My hands clenched the fabric of my coat so tight I thought it might tear. I backed away before they saw me, my pulse racing, my chest tight. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The scales fell from my eyes. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't a mistake. That was who she had become. Ungrateful, entitled, blind to sacrifice. I returned home that night, sat at my desk, and pulled out the folder. The numbers stared back at me, almost mocking me the way her laughter had. I whispered into the dark, "You'll never see this. Not now. Not ever." My pen hovered over the page where I had written Claire's future fund. I thought about crossing it out, erasing her name, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I closed the book slowly, pressed my palm to the cracked leather cover, and let the weight of the years settle into me. I had been willing to hand her everything. My life, distilled into numbers and ink. But she had made her choice. And so I made mine. From that night forward, the decision was solid. Claire would never touch that money, not as long as I had breath in me. What I hadn't yet decided was where it would go instead. But I knew one thing for certain: it would no longer be wasted on someone who mocked the very hands that fed her. The shift didn't go unnoticed. Claire had always been sharp, always quick to read people's moods, especially mine. So when I stopped calling her every other night, when my visits became shorter, when my smile seemed painted on instead of real, she noticed. One afternoon, she showed up at my house unannounced. No knock, no call. Just the door swinging open and her voice cutting through the air. "Mom, what's going on with you?" I looked up from the kitchen table where my old leather notebook lay beneath my hand. The pages were closed, but I could feel the weight of them pulsing through the cover. "Nothing," I said softly. "I'm fine." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't lie to me. You've been off ever since the shower. You barely spoke to me that day. You left early." "People noticed." I shrugged, reaching for the teapot, anything to avoid her gaze. I was just tired, but she wouldn't let it go. She leaned forward, her tone sharper now. "Tired? Or hiding something? Tell me, Mom, did you have something else planned? Some kind of real gift?" Her words hit me like a slap. Real gift. The silver rattle, the symbol of my love, dismissed as if it were worthless. I forced my hands to remain steady as I poured the tea. Inside, my heart rattled louder than the boiling water. "I gave you what I wanted to give you," I murmured. She scoffed, loud, ungracious. "Come on. You're always squirreling money away, always so secretive. Don't think I haven't noticed. Do you know how embarrassing it was sitting there while everyone else opened designer strollers, $1,000 gift cards, and then you?" She paused, her laugh cutting the air like glass. "Handing me some antique trinket like we're living in the 1800s? I set the teapot down harder than I meant to. The ceramic clink echoed. My voice came out low, trembling. "That rattle belonged to your grandmother. She gave it to me when you were born. It wasn't about the price." Claire rolled her eyes. "Yeah, well, the world doesn't run on sentiment. Michael and I are starting a family. We need practical help, real help. If you've got something saved, you should stop being so selfish and step up." I couldn't answer, my lips pressed into a thin line. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "I knew it. You're holding out on me. I could feel it that day, the way you sat there sulking. What are you hiding, Mom?" "Huh? Some kind of savings account? Bonds? Insurance?" Her voice rose with every word. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to shout that I had sacrificed my entire life for her, that the money existed because of me and me alone. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached for the notebook, slid it off the table, and held it against me as if shielding it from her eyes. Her gaze darted to it, narrowing. "That thing again? You're always writing in it. What's in there?" I shook my head. "Just notes. Old memories." She stepped closer, hand outstretched, and for one terrifying moment, I thought she would rip it from me. I held it tighter, my knuckles white. "Don't," I whispered. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Unbelievable. You'd rather cling to your silly little secrets than help your own daughter. Do you know how pathetic that looks?" People are starting to wonder if you even care about this baby. The words sank deep. Not care? As if my entire life hadn't been dedicated to making hers better. That night, I sat in bed, replaying every syllable. The whispers began with the rest of the family too. My sister called, hesitant. Maggie, maybe she was just nervous, maybe she didn't mean it. She's about to be a mother. Don't you think, for the baby's sake, you could still? I cut her off. No, but Maggie, no, my voice cracked, louder than I intended. You don't know what she said when the guests left. You don't know what she really thinks of me. Even my brother chimed in days later. Maybe just a little help, Maggie. She's family. That baby's your grandchild. I hung up the phone before he finished. The pressure closed in on all sides. Claire had her army of sympathizers, weaving stories of me being stingy, bitter, selfish. Even Michael, her fiancé, cornered me at a family dinner. We're just trying to understand, Maggie, he said, smiling that smug, patronizing smile. Why you're holding back? You worked all those years, didn't you? Saved something? Don't you want to see your daughter thrive? Don't you want your grandchild to have a good start? I stared at him across the table, my hand gripping the notebook tucked into my bag, my pulse pounded in my ears. He leaned closer, voice low enough for only me to hear. Or maybe you just like watching people struggle. Maybe it makes you feel powerful. Is that it? The air left my lungs. For a second, I thought I might collapse right there. I wanted to shout, to slam the truth into his smug face, to tell him that without me, they wouldn't even have the roof over their heads. But instead, I said nothing, nothing at all. I went home that night, unlocked the drawer, and laid the deed papers across the desk. The saving statements, the bonds, the accounts, all spread before me like a map of my life. My hands trembled as I pressed the notebook against them, as though trying to fuse the past with the present. The leather was warm under my touch, worn smooth by years of holding. It felt like armor now. Every time Claire's words tried to pierce me, I clutched that book tighter. My shield, my proof. They thought I was selfish. They thought I was cruel. But they didn't know. They would never know. And as long as I had that notebook, as long as I guarded it with everything I had, the truth remained mine alone. The war between us had begun. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken, garlic bread, and the faint sweetness of apple pie cooling on the counter. A normal family dinner. A warm, inviting table. But underneath? The air was heavy, thick with something no one wanted to say out loud. We were all gathered, the whole clan. My sister and her husband, my brother and his kids, cousins filling every chair. And at the end of the table, Claire, her fiancé Michael beside her, wearing that smug little grin that made my skin crawl. The laughter rose and fell, clinking glasses, forks scraping against plates. But I felt her eyes on me. Watching, waiting. Then, like a knife slipped between ribs, Claire's voice cut through the chatter. You know, she said loudly, smiling as if sharing a funny little secret. Mom didn't really get us much at the shower. Nothing big. Nothing practical. The room went quiet, forks suspended midair. My throat tightened. She probably just doesn't have much left, Claire continued, her laugh sharp, cruel. I mean, let's be real. She never did keep up with the times. Maybe she's just too broke to matter anymore. A ripple of awkward laughter. Some looked at their plates. Others glanced at me with pity. My cheeks burned. For a moment, I wanted to shrink into silence, to let the insult hang there, unchallenged as I had before. But something inside me cracked open. I set my fork down. Slowly, deliberately. No, I said. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled under the table. You're wrong. The entire table froze. Claire tilted her head, mocking. Oh? Am I? I drew in a breath, every word scraping against the years of sacrifice lodged in my chest. For decades I worked. Extra shifts, overtime. I gave up vacations, new clothes, dinners out. I clipped coupons until my fingers hurt. I went without, so you wouldn't have to. My voice grew louder, stronger. Every dollar I saved for you. For your future. for your family. That's what I lived for. Her smirk faltered. What are you talking about? I leaned forward, my gaze locked on hers. The college fund, Claire. The one you mocked me for being too old-fashioned to keep. It wasn't a little nest egg. It wasn't pocket change. I let the silence stretch, the anticipation swell. It was $180,000. The room gasped. A collective inhale, like the walls themselves had pulled in breath. Claire's fork clattered to her plate. Michael's jaw tightened. My sister's hand flew to her mouth. 180,000, I repeated slowly. Every cent scraped from my life, every sacrifice poured into a future for you. The silence was thick, suffocating. Then Claire's voice cracked through it. You, what? You had that? And you didn't. She stopped, eyes darting around, fury bubbling up. You were going to give it to me? And then what? What changed? I swallowed. My throat ached. What changed was hearing you laugh at me. Hearing you mock me to your friends, calling me outdated, pathetic. Watching you sit in judgment, dismissing the years I gave you as if they were nothing. Her face flushed crimson. That's ridiculous. I was just joking. You're blowing it out of proportion. No. My voice was quiet, but it sliced sharper than her shrieks. I almost handed it over, Claire. Even after everything you said at the shower, I had the check written. But then I heard you again, heard you tearing me down, mocking me like I was some fool. And in that moment, I pressed my hand to the table, steady, firm. I decided. You will never see that money. Gasps again, a low murmur around the table. Michael slammed his palm down. That's absurd. That money belongs to Claire. You can't just. I turned to him, calm. Cold. It never belonged to her. It was mine. Mine to give. Mine to choose. He leaned in, jaw clenched, teeth bared. So what? You're just going to let it rot? Let it sit there to prove some petty point? I shook my head. No. The word was sharp. Final. I lifted my chin, my voice steady, deliberate. It's already been moved, transferred into a trust. For the baby. The room went silent again, but this time the silence carried weight. The air shifted. Claire blinked. What? What do you mean? I said, the money is no longer yours to waste. It's in your child's name, locked away until they're old enough for college. Protected. Safe. Out of your reach. Her chair screeched back, fury exploding. You can't do that. That's betrayal. That's my money. I looked at her, calm as stone. It was never your money. It was my gift. And I will not hand a lifetime of sacrifice to someone who mocks me, belittles me, and treats me like trash. But I will give it to my grandchild. They will have the education, the opportunity, the future I dreamed of for you. She trembled, eyes wild. You don't get to decide that. You're a manipulative old. Enough, my voice thundered across the table, and the chatter died instantly. Do not forget who raised you. Who held you when you were sick, who worked herself to the bone so you could have every opportunity. I gave you love, shelter, and a chance at life better than mine. And this? I tapped the table, every word deliberate. This is how you repay me. With cruelty, with contempt. The room stayed still, every eye locked on me, some wide with shock, some glistening with tears. Claire's voice cracked, shrill, desperate. You're punishing me. You're trying to control me. You don't care about me. You just want to look like some saint to everyone else. I stared at her, my voice low now, slow, almost mournful. I cared more than you will ever understand. But I will not reward cruelty. I will not hand my blood and sweat to someone who spits on it. Michael muttered under his breath, venom dripping. Selfish. Bitter, old woman. But from the other end of the table my brother's voice rose strong. No, she's right. All eyes turned. He leaned forward, nodding at me. She sacrificed more than any of us ever did. And Claire, his gaze cut to her, sharp, you don't deserve a cent of it. Murmurs rippled. My sister whispered agreement. A cousin muttered, good for her. But not everyone approved. One aunt shook her head, frowning. Maggie, maybe this was too harsh. Family is family, I lifted my hand. Family is not entitlement. Family is not cruelty. Family is love, and if love is not returned, then I will direct mine where it will grow, not where it is poisoned. The silence stretched again. The weight of my words pressed against the walls. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but not of sorrow rage. You'll regret this. You'll die alone, and no one will be there for you. And when that baby grows up, I'll make sure they know what a bitter, heartless woman you really were. I inhaled deeply, slowly. No. One day, that child will know. They'll know their grandmother loved them enough to protect their future. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see the truth you refuse to. Her chair toppled back as she stormed from the room, Michael scrambling after her, his voice hissing curses as they left. The rest of us sat in silence. The chicken grew cold, the pie untouched. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The dinner ended with shattered silence, and in the days that followed, the pieces of my family fell scattered across the floor. Some looked at me with new eyes. My sister squeezed my hand and said, "You were brave, Becca." Finally brave enough to draw the line. Others muttered behind my back that I should have thought of the baby, that Claire's words came from stress, not malice. But for the first time in decades, I didn't fold under guilt. I stood tall. I walked into my empty house, hung up my coat, and breathed, free. Claire didn't call. Not the next day. Not the next week. She vanished into silence, but her absence was a different kind of gift. My phone still rang. Nieces checking in, old friends stopping by. They said they respected me more than ever. And me? I didn't feel like the family's provider anymore. I felt like a woman who had finally claimed her worth. One afternoon, I opened the drawer where the notebook rested. I held it in my lap, flipping pages filled with numbers that once carried so much weight. And then I took the silver rattle, soft shine, tiny chime, and I placed them together inside a memory box. A box not for Claire, but for the child she's bringing into this world. One day, maybe that little one will find it and understand what love really looked like. Word spread quickly. Claire and Michael were struggling. Bills piled up, rent unpaid. They had to sell their designer clothes, cancel their vacations. People whispered about their fall from comfort, about how the world suddenly demanded they stand on their own 2 feet. And me? I watched from a distance. No bitterness. No triumph. Just peace. Justice in its quiet form. I had carried the weight of sacrifice for too long. Now it was theirs to carry. And mine to finally set down. Money isn't love, and love isn't money. Respect. That is the bridge between them. I raised a daughter on love. On bedtime stories, scraped knees kissed, pennies stretched into futures. And still, she mocked me. Mocked the very hands that held her steady when the world was too heavy. There's a part of me that will always ache for the girl who once curled into my lap, begging for another story, but I cannot ignore the woman she's become. And I will not feed the hunger of entitlement. I know some of you might say I was too harsh, that a mother should always give. But I ask you this, when does giving become enabling? When does love become mistaken for a bottomless wallet? When someone mocks the hands that fed them, they should not be surprised when those hands close the wallet. So now, I turn to you. Tell me, would you have done the same? Would you have handed her the fund anyway, hoping gratitude would bloom? Or would you have drawn the line, as I did? I would love to hear your thoughts below. And if this story made you stop, think, maybe even feel something deep inside, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like mine, stories that remind us love is strong, but respect is stronger.